So to get us kicked off today, I'll just do a quick introduction. We have Dr. Michelle Fanucchi, who is going to be speaking on North Birmingham, of which she and I have been involved with well over 2 years now. I'll let you tell how we got all involved in that, assuming that's part of your presentation. But through the Edge of Chaos, and we've been actively involved. We've also run, through the School of Public Health 2 years ago, a wicked problem case competition on North Birmingham, which I hope you will address because we've got some really, really good ideas out of that in terms of direction. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the School of Public Health's Wicked Case program, you'll get to see it coming out in the spring. It's an opportunity to participate for students in solving major problems in the local area, and it is unbelievable the input we get back from the students. So with that, Michelle, welcome to the Edge of Chaos, and you're up.
Thank you. Well, David only half told the truth. I did not have a choice on my topic. I started coming up with some topics, and he said, but you're going to be talking on North Birmingham. But that's okay. North Birmingham has become very near and dear to my heart. And unfortunately, I won't be able to get into everything that David and I have been working on because it's a very complex issue. And I have found that a lot of people don't really understand what the process is, what EPA can do for Birmingham, what EPA cannot do for Birmingham, and the timeline that is even possible for anything to happen in. And so I'm going to talk about North Birmingham as our focus, but I'm also going to be talking about EPA and Superfund in general. Okay? So this image is from a documentary that a local nonprofit, GASP, some activists in town, put together to bring the idea of all the pollutants in North Birmingham to more people. And this is the side of someone's house over in North Birmingham. There is so much particulate air pollution in that neighborhood that the siding routinely gets coated in soot. And so they can literally have to clean it every day if they wanted to keep it clean. One thing that I can't do today, and I think that these documentaries do a good job of letting the people who live in North Birmingham tell their story. I can't possibly do justice to their story. But what I can do is tell you what I have seen and what I have learned and maybe some ideas for how we all can help, because it's not just North Birmingham's problem, it's Birmingham's problem, it's an over-the-mountain problem, it's our community's issue. So I first got involved with this problem. A friend of mine over in nursing called me and said, hey, I work at Head Start over there, there's a big community meeting, they're having a lot of trouble understanding what the county and what the federal government is telling them about pollution in their neighborhood. And I thought, okay, I'll go. And lucky for me, Channel 42 was there documenting everybody. And so this is one of the pictures from there to prove that I was there. Let's see, that's me right there, and that's Claudia Lungu. So we were there. I am a very private, quiet person. I like to get the lay of the land. I don't like to make a public nuisance. I don't like drama. And there was something in my body language that night that Dr. Lungu was grabbing my arm and keeping me from jumping up and saying things to the people that were speaking to the community, because I felt that the community was asking very good questions. And they were not being listened to, and they were being told rehearsed answers that may or may not have aligned with the question that was being asked. So that's what got me started. I thought, this cannot be the way it happens. So, where is North Birmingham? I moved here in 2007. Started dealing with this in 2011. I didn't really know where we were going. So, this is a map of Birmingham. Here's about where UAB is. You see since it's a blazer day, it's green and yellow, green and gold. And this is the North Birmingham community up here, so not very far away from us, okay? And there's no mountain, there's nothing to keep the air from moving towards us, okay? So it's not just a North Birmingham problem. This is a closer up of the neighborhoods that have been put into the Superfund area. So this is the neighborhood of North Birmingham, the neighborhood of Collegeville, of Harriman Park, and of Fairmont. Okay, those 4 neighborhoods make up the core of the people that are being affected by this Superfund designation. So what is Superfund? I know it because I'm a toxicologist by training. Every place that I have lived, in Minnesota or in California, there have been Superfund sites not too far away from where I live. So this is what people think about Superfund: hazardous waste, toxic waste, men in hazmat suits moving old oil barrels around. But Superfund is actually an environmental program that was established to address abandoned hazardous waste sites. Okay, we found out that all of a sudden we had creeks being contaminated, water supplies being contaminated, sometimes radioactivity leaking into different areas for all different reasons. And this Superfund, the fund, was established by the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act of 1980. And for short, everyone in the business just calls it CERCLA. Okay, so that's what we use, is CERCLA. And CERCLA allowed the EPA to clean up sites and to compel responsible parties to pay for and clean up sites. So if EPA can put their lawyers on and find out who potential responsible parties are, they cast a wide net, and they will find you, and they will compel you to clean up. That is one thing the EPA lawyers do a very good job of. So CERCLA, again, was enacted in 1980, and the fund comes from a tax on chemical and petroleum industries. And it gives federal authority to respond directly to releases of hazardous chemicals. So it has an emergency response action to it. And it also has our trust fund to clean up abandoned or uncontrolled waste sites. So when it was originally formed in 1980, the fund was about $1.6 billion, which sounds like a lot. So again, CERCLA can deal with short-term removals, so those emergency actions. If there is a problem that is going to impact human health immediately, EPA will bring their contractors in and clean up the site. And they also deal with long-term remedial response actions. Okay? And those are only conducted at sites that make it onto a national priorities list. And we'll talk about that in a little while. Another phrase that gets thrown around is SARA. SARA is the Superfund Amendment and Reauthorization Act of 1986. So EPA found in the first 6 years of running CERCLA that they didn't really have the authority and the money that they needed to clean up the sites. That the problem of abandoned hazardous waste was much, much bigger than they knew about. So SARA stressed the importance of making sure we have permanent remedies on site and that we use the most innovative treatment technologies to clean these sites up. SARA also gave EPA new enforcement laws and settlement tools. So it gave them more, it gave the laws more teeth. SARA also went from talking about worrying about whether or not a creek was polluted to really focusing on which sites were going to cause human health problems. And they really, really brought that to the forefront. Another big thing about the 1986 amendment was that they realized that they could make none of this work if they didn't have citizen participation in the process. Because these areas weren't just out in the middle of nowhere. A lot of times they're in the middle of cities. They're in the middle of residential areas like we have in North Birmingham. And when I said $1.6 million seemed like a lot, the 1986 amendment increased the trust fund to $8.1 billion. And it's still not enough. Okay? So what is the national priorities list that I talked about? Well, you have to be on the national priorities list to guide EPA in the long-term remediation. And so there's a process of being put onto the list. And as of October 2nd, this is the number of priority sites, national priority sites on the list. So between non-federal and federal sites, there are 49 sites that are currently proposed. So they're just proposed, they're not actually on the list. There are 1,322 that are on the list. And only 384 have been deleted off the list since 1980. Okay, so this is a long-term process to get your site off the list. And this is where all the sites are. So the square boxes are priority lists, the diamonds are proposed lists, and any of them with an X have been deleted. Okay? So you can see that California has a lot. The East Coast is just basically one giant big Superfund site. And they will tell you that, anyone that lives on the East Coast will tell you that it seems like it's just Superfund site, Superfund site, Superfund site. Michigan, around Detroit, anywhere there's manufacturing, foundries, things like that, like we have it here in Birmingham. We have a lot of Superfund sites. In Alabama, it doesn't look so bad. We have some down here by Mobile. We've got some around Montgomery. These are the ones around Birmingham, and there should be a new one right here. As of September 22nd, there's a proposed site in North Birmingham. Okay? So, but one of the things that keeps you from being on the list is you have to be proposed by a state to be on it. So Alabama can propose one site a year to be on the list, and Alabama doesn't usually do that. You can have a federal agency come in, CDC, the testing arm of it, ATSDR, can come in and say that there's a human health problem, and then hand it over to EPA, and it can be proposed to be on the national priority list. But it's a lot longer if you don't have state and local officials helping you along with that process. So this is just a quick picture. David said not to make it boring. Well, this is a whole semester's worth of lectures on how Superfund works. But I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not a politician. So these are just the steps that you have to go through. So you start here with site identification and national priority listing process. Okay, those are the first two steps. And after that, you move on to remediation, planning, construction, there's post-construction completion. It takes a while to be finally deleted off the list to make sure that everything's done right, and finally to reuse. The longest portion of this process is this first part right here. This can take a very, very long time. Part of that is because it can take a long time for the community to get EPA to come and do the assessments to show that it's a hazard and get put on the list. It can, then APA starts looking for responsible parties. And every responsible party has their own set of lawyers. And every responsible party will file against EPA, making them a responsible party. So that can take a really long time. But once you get to around here, and you start making your plans, it can go a lot faster, because once you have concrete plans in place, actually things can move forward. So we need to focus on getting ourselves down the stream here. So how long have we known that there's a problem in Birmingham? Well, I found this article from 1968 in Public Health Reports, And this figure shows the author's estimation of particulate emissions in Birmingham from the different industries. And this dark area, so this is Birmingham, and these dark areas are estimates that there were more than 10 tons of particulate emissions each day during that time. That's a little chunky. And that's probably why a lot of people live over the mountain. And the lowest one, and there's a lot of this area, and that's 0.5 to about 1.5 tons emitted per day. And so you put them all together, that's a lot of particle emission. Okay? So we've known for a long time that the air quality in Birmingham has not been so good.
Michelle, is that because the steel industries were over there?
Yes.
And the mountain just kind of blocked it, some of the
Yes.
emissions from coming over?
Yes.
Okay.
So we have, back in '68, there were a lot more
So what is it
factories
now?
and foundries. What is it now?
I mean, I'm sorry, I don't know, I know what 10 tons is, but what is a reasonable ton? I mean, is that bad or horrible?
That's probably now what would be considered hazardous at the highest level that EPA would have. It's probably similar to having a forest fire in California.
What are the Chinese cities, do you know?
Those actually probably approach this at times. When you can see the picture, like Beijing before the Olympics, and you could barely see things, that was probably approaching this.
But it's not only particulate matter. it's
Yeah,
also-
yeah, there are other things too. This just, along with particulate matter, if you're allowing that much particulate matter to be emitted, you're having volatile organic carbons, which are toxic. They can attach to the particles, and if they attach to the particles, they can get down your respiratory tract. So it's just this is just an indicator of how bad it was. The report said that some of the reports said that they would put filters this size out in the measuring devices, and in 24 hours they would be solid black. That's how much particulate emission there was, and that wouldn't happen at now today. But yes, this is you could probably feel it when you were breathing. It's probably chunky. So in 1970 was when EPA actually was first put together. And people always are amazed at this, but President Nixon is the one that signed this into being. He pulled together a lot of different fractured agencies and pulled them all in together under the Environmental Protection Agency. And it was the same year that we had our first Comprehensive Clean Air Act. In 1971, about 11 months after EPA was created, EPA used the full force of their office, and the Department of Justice came to Birmingham to shut down some of the industries because the air quality was so bad. We had we were not the only city to have that happen to, but I think we might have been the first. I know that it was bad in Detroit, it was bad in Cleveland, it was bad wherever you had industries, but that's how bad it was here. And this is the picture. I think this is in Collegeville. It was taken by Leroy Woodson, and this is not mist. This is the particle emissions on that day. So it was never really sunny over in College Town. It was always hot, hazy. It gets a little quiet until in the 1980s, EPA came to Sloss Industries under the guise of RCRA, which is the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. They are the part of EPA that works with operational industries and hazardous pollutants inside the fence line. There were some concerns about hazardous pollution inside the fence line at Sloss Industries, and they entered into an administrative order with EPA to start investigating that pollutant. The people who work for RCRA were very concerned about the community. They also have community engagement people that work with this part of EPA. And they were very concerned with what they saw when they were going back and forth to the site. And so they, along with other people, pushed for there to be testing outside the fence line and in the community. So around 2009, Walter Koch, which is what SLOSS used to be, Walter Koch, agreed with EPA to sample yards, any drainages, and public properties in the neighborhood to find out how far the contamination actually went. And this is a picture of some of the sampling that was done in 2009. So Walter Koch had to hire a consulting company to do the sampling for them and turn over all of the results to the EPA. So this is the Walter Koch facility. Okay, this is Collegeville, Fairmont Park, Fairmont on this side. This is Brigham School. Look at how close that is to Walter Koch. This is the brand new Hudson School. This is Carver High School. And this is Head Start. Head Start is very, very close to Walter Koch. The green dots are the screening for arsenic that came below an action level. So according to the action level that was set before they screened, these were okay. The red stars are where the arsenic came up of an action level, that it's high enough in the environment that they actually have to clean it up. They also looked for benzoate-pyrene toxicity equivalents. It's another form of a pollutant that we worry about. And you can see there are a lot more stars on this one. Okay? And benzoate-pyrenes would be an indication of something that would come from a Koch facility. Okay? And it could come from air deposition. It could also come from some other ways. There's some suggestion that people who worked at Walter Koch sometimes took dirt out for fill in their yards, and this was contaminated. And so unknowingly contaminated yards and contaminated the community. So, but that was very common practice back then before we knew any better. So how long did it take? EPA was here in the 80s. Okay, RIPRA was here in the 80s. They started testing outside the fence line in the late 2000s. And on September 22nd, 2014, the 35th Avenue site finally got proposed to be on the national priorities list. And this is fast. This is fast because Maxine Parker, who was the councilwoman of that district, made it her business and her passion to speak to everyone she could about the problems in North Birmingham. Everyone in EPA knew who she was. She would call, they knew her voice. She would call ADEM, she would call the city, she was on the city council, but she would call other parts of the city government. They knew her at Department of Justice. They knew her everywhere. And she was a force. And she was a big reason that EPA started paying so much attention to this area. We're still not on the list officially. There's a 90-day comment period. So anyone is able to comment on the proposed listing of this site. Now, it used to be that they called Superfund sites the name of the company that they found the site at. But the companies have not cared for that very much. They didn't really like their names being associated with something Superfund. So now, instead of the Walter Koch Superfund site, this is the 35th Avenue site. Okay? And this is actually a picture of Walter Koch on their advertising area, because they started, in 2012, they started using CSX to bring their coal from Tuscaloosa here. And this was part of their environmentally conscious way, keeping trucks off the road. So now that we've got Superfund here, what can we expect as a community? Well, one of the things that EPA has done here that they've never done anyplace else, this is the first place it's happened, is Superfund community engagement people have been here before the site is listed. So back in 2009, EPA made a conscious decision to do things in the opposite direction that they normally do. And they put community engagement folks here in Birmingham. They wanted the community to know. Why did they do this? They realized that there's a lot of mistrust in this community. The community doesn't trust the local government. The community doesn't trust the county government. The community doesn't trust the state government. Sometimes one neighborhood doesn't trust the other neighborhood. So there's just a lot of trust issues, and you can tell. EPA knew there was a problem in 1970. So another thing that EPA has done is they are helping to create the North Birmingham Community Coalition. And with a group called TEOC Solutions, which helped facilitate this process, we now have a coalition formed that has members from all 4 of the affected neighborhoods. They have organized themselves into work groups for different areas. They have facilitators. They have gotten skills in how to run the meetings, skills in how to come up with solutions that are a consensus for the whole community, not just for one neighborhood over the other. And what Stephanie Brown, who's the community engagement person from EPA, always says is, now EPA is going to do what EPA is going to do. And the coalition is going to do what the coalition is going to do. But they can work in concert. So the coalition is not there to figure out how to clean up the contamination. That's EPA's job. And EPA is not there to make sure we have the right housing, to make sure we have revitalization, to make sure that we have new commercial businesses. That's the coalition's job, and the city's job, and the county's job. But they work together. So why do we care about the North Birmingham community? Well, the North Birmingham community is very rich in history. So Bethel Baptist Church is in North Birmingham, and that is the church that Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth was pastor of until 1961. So it has a lot of civil rights history. A lot of the people that I've worked with on the Community Coalition were in the Children's March. They remember leaving school and being arrested and having houses bombed. It's a lot of history. They do have some lovely parks in North Birmingham. And they do. This is the school on the bottom, that's Hudson K through 8 school. It's a gorgeous school, beautiful school. It's definitely nicer than the one I went to elementary school to. So they do have a lot to offer.
And Michelle, is that site safe, the school site?
So that is one of the reasons why people started getting upset, because they built this brand new school. And then for some reason they went and tested it, and brand new school, brand new dirt, came up positive for toxicants. So the soil had to be remediated immediately from the school. And then everybody said, well, I live across the street from the school. If the dirt at the school wasn't safe, what about the dirt in my yard? And I have kids. So that started people being aware that that's a problem. And it just sort of was the defining moment to get people involved, which is, you gotta have something. But there are other things about North Birmingham that are not so nice. Right? This is a recycling company that's in Collegeville. And this is a nice picture of the recycling facility that's in North Birmingham. I drive past it almost every time I go to a meeting there, and the piles just keep getting higher and higher and higher, and there's no fence to cover it, and sometimes there's a piece of fence that's falling down into the roadway. So that's a problem. This is a picture of Vulture Coat. There are houses right here on this side of the road, and that's what they look at.
Is it still active?
Yes, it's still active. They're still very active, actually, yes. Vulture Coat and ABC Drummond are both active. And ABC Drummond is a little bit farther away. And then this is what passes as a grocery store in Collegeville. I'm not picking on Alfano's. There are 2 or 3 others. Corner stores, Gone In It. They sell sodas, they sell junk food, they sell nothing healthy and nothing without preservatives that would survive a nuclear attack. It is not a grocery store. And this is what they have in Collegeville. So there's room for improvement aside from the environmental issues. So one of the things that SKIO did was they put together a lot of maps to help tell the story of what it's like to live in North Birmingham. And so this is a land use map of North Birmingham. Okay, so this is North Birmingham. Yellow is residential, so you can see the little residential areas, Collegeville, Harriman Park, and then Fairmont over here. Purple is industry. So Fairmont over here, big area of industry all around here and over here in North Birmingham. And as you notice,
Where's 280?
280, so this is Caraway right here. 280 goes this way.
Okay,
Yeah. So this is Caraway.
okay.
So what you can tell, and what was most shocking to me the first time I went over there in the daytime, is that this is all railroad bringing Collegeville. Okay. And it doesn't take very many times before you're trapped in or out of this area. And I have been trapped more times than I can count. I'm getting to know all the little side roads, and there's a few ways out if you know and are patient. But I've gone from this direction and been trapped by the trains on Vanderbilt, and I've gone this way and been trapped by trains on 27th, and I've gone on 35th, and there's train tracks on 35th that you can be trapped by. So, the other thing that's notable about this map are the brown areas. All of the brown areas are vacant and not used. So there's a lot of vacant industrial areas here, and you can tell within the residential, there's a lot of vacant areas. So there's, yes.
Michelle, can you go back to that now, because
Oops, I'm sorry.
one of the other, and you may be going there, are you going to show one with the floodplain?
I don't have that one, but yes.
Because to
Right
me,
here.
that's Village Creek that
Yes.
forms the southern edge,
And it-
part of our significant potential greenway system.
Yep.
But if you looked at the floodplain overlay, you would see that virtually all of Collegeville up to Herman Park is a floodplain.
Yes.
So all of that drains into Village Creek, and by rights, besides all the other issues you talked about, no one should be living there.
Right.
That's part of the social justice issue, is when we had racial zoning,
Mhm.
which every city in the country had, not just us, but every city had, the places where poor people, often people of color, were allowed to live were places that the rest of us wouldn't want to live. Consequently, floodplains being, these days, we mostly just put trailer parks in floodplains, but,
And it's not like we don't know about it, because one of the city workers from, that comes to some of the meetings talks with the residents about, oh yeah, 20 years ago, I was on 27th and Vanderbilt, and I had to jump out of my car quick because my car got taken by floodwaters and, disappeared down the way. And I thought, does this not seem to be a problem for anyone? And people seem to take it in stride, and I don't understand. There's also no, they have open ditches for their water control out there. Okay, so there's no drainage, which doesn't help the flooding issue.
well, it can sometimes, because most of our storm system in areas like that is unmaintained, so
Well,
it
that's
actually doesn't work.
Yeah.
Daylighting drainage is a contemporary solution to that, but anything
Yeah.
draining from those kind of toxic areas into our water
Yep.
is not a good thing.
No, it's not a good thing. And yeah, I didn't put that one in there, but yes, it's this whole area over here floods. And I can't imagine living with that sort of threat around. So other things that we have to think about, and I throw this in because this is a hot button issue to the community. They don't have access to healthcare in their community. Okay, so we used to have a North Birmingham public health clinic, and it's not there anymore. That was right here. So right now for emergency services, this line is 1 mile, this is 2 miles, and this is 5 miles from the center of the study area. And you can see that the emergency care is all close to the 5-mile range. And for primary care access that accepts Medicare patients, there's some at the 2 mile, but again, a lot of them are at the 5 mile, between the 2 and the 5 mile area on that. And this, if you're trying to rebuild trust in a community, this is going to have to be addressed. They really feel that this aspect is key to having a healthy, vital community. And then this is how much office and commercial space currently exists. And this goes back to having the, pushing the core into an area that was undesirable. There's a couple of spots of commercial, but not very much in Collegeville, or Harriman Park, there's one here, one there. But North Birmingham actually has a fairly decent sized commercial district. And that's where the one grocery store, the Piggly Wiggly, is. So there's no grocery store here, there's no grocery store over here, there's a grocery store here. And, yeah.
I've been told it's closed.
The Piggly Wiggly is closed
Yeah,
now?
this week I was told.
Oh, well, that would be new then. So then there's no grocery store.
Yeah.
Well, so I asked about that, because I personally like my Piggly Wiggly over in River Run. It's not the newest, it's not the fanciest, but I like it. And they won't, the neighbors in Collegeville and Harriman Park that I talked to won't go to the Piggly Wiggly in North Birmingham. They would drive to Walmart in Fultondale. So
Is that a cost issue, do you believe?
I don't know. I've actually never been, I never did go into the Piggly Wiggly in North Birmingham. I don't know what the vegetables look like. I don't know. Piggly Wigglies are very specific to who's owning it. It's not like a Publix. And I don't know if it wasn't maintained. Walmart is your one-stop shopping, and one of the neighborhood members is very keen on that. She likes it, and I'm like, oh no, that's the worst thing you can do for your neighborhood. But definitely there are some issues here. We don't have any commercial revitalization going on at the moment. And then this is healthy access to food. Okay, so this was the Piggly Wiggly right here. And this is Grow, Alabama. Everything else is a corner food store like Alfonso's that I showed you. That's it. So you can't send your kid out to get something from the grocery store that's healthy. The kids don't see healthy food walking around. They see prepackaged snowballs and cookies and everything that kid loves, but should be only food in moderation. So that's one of the problems, and these are all things that the coalition is working to address with the help of resource individuals from all over the area. So this was to remind me how far along the Superfund process we are. Again, we're down here. We're in the slowest part of the Superfund process, okay? And we want to be here.
Any idea what that time frame is in years in terms of how to get from?
So my husband works health and safety for these kinds of sites, Superfund sites, and he was on one in Louisville, Mississippi that took 12 years from the decision to clean it up to the present day. And they're not finished yet. And all they're doing is cleaning the dirt, capping the most contaminated in the middle of the site, and putting grass over the top of it for a park. And it's taken that long. It's a long process. Very long process. But there is hope. There is hope. So what do people do with the reuse and redevelopment? So in 1999, I believe it was, EPA really put an effort forth for site reuse and redevelopment. And the biggest part of this is that EPA and the community partners really need to explore future use before the cleanup starts. Okay? And that is because if you're going to clean it up for an industrial park, the levels that you have to get it to are much different than if you're going to clean it up for a residential mixed-use park. Okay? And a lot of times it comes down to how much money is it going to take to go that extra effort to get it to a residential? Because you want the residential to be clean, because you're going to have kids there, you're going to be living in it. An industrial park, you're just going to be, there's going to be covered with asphalt, it's going to be covered with concrete. It's not going to be an issue, it's going to be encapsulated. So a lot of redevelopment has been things like in Central City, Clear Creek, Colorado, that is an Indian casino that bought the site and paved over it and built a casino. The Denver Radium site became a Home Depot. The site in California across the freeway from where I lived was a horribly polluted fertilizer site where people had dumped. It's part capped with a park that actually is not really a park because no one's allowed to go on it, a green space, and then a parking lot and a Target. So that's not what this community wants. So I found some hope. So in Utah, there was a place called Midville Slag. And this is what it looked like during cleanup. So it was awful. It was a slag site, it looked terrible, nothing grew there, it was old, condemned, it was just horrible. And this is the process of them cleaning it up. So you can tell bit by bit, it starts looking more clean and more clean. And then this was their vision. Their vision in Utah was to have 220 acres with 90 acres of it to be commercial and the rest of it, or 70 of it to be residential. Okay, so 70 acres residential. And it was going to house 5,000 residents, which is similar to what we're looking at in North Birmingham. And this was the vision. They called it Riverwalk. And I have to say, this is what it looks like today. Okay? So they have commercial offices. They have a light rail station. They have multi-unit housing. They have some single-family housing. They have a parkway. They have grocery stores. They have commercial. They have everything that the community wants. So it is possible to do it, but we can't allow North Birmingham to just sort of keep working by themselves. You know, they need resource partners. They need buy-in from the city. They need buy-in in the Regional Planning Commission. And hopefully one day, we will get our own certificate of reuse. And this is the most favorite one I have. It's because it's ready for mixed reuse. It's ready for residential use. And that's what we can hope for Birmingham. There's a lot more to tell of this story, but David told me to keep it short. So.